When we talk about sajda, most of us immediately think of it as a physical act, the act of bowing down, touching our forehead to the ground in prayer. And yes, that is what it looks like from the outside. But if we stop there, we miss the heart of the matter entirely. Sajda is not just a movement. It is a language, a dialogue between the human soul and its creator. It is the moment when the weight of the world, with all its illusions of power and control, is released, even if just for a few seconds, and the believer stands, or rather lowers themselves, completely vulnerable, completely dependent, completely aware of their absolute need for Allah. Think about the act itself. You lower your head, your most honored and expressive part of the body, to the ground. There is something profoundly symbolic about this. Psychologists tell us that posture affects emotion. When you assume a position of humility, your mind and heart begin to feel humility. When you lower yourself physically, it signals, even to your own subconscious, that you are submitting. And in the case of sajda, this is not submission to another human being, not submission to a system or an ideology, but submission to the one who created you, who knows you better than you know yourself, and who holds all things in his hands. It is in this very submission that sajda begins to touch the deepest parts of our spirituality. When the Prophet FDFA said that the closest a servant is to his Lord is when he is in prostration, he was speaking to a profound truth that combines both the metaphysical and the psychological. Metaphysically, sajda is a step closer because it is an act that acknowledges the ultimate reality, that we are not self-sufficient, that we are dependent beings, and that our lives are choices. Our very breaths are in the hands of Allah. Psychologically, sajda is transformative because it allows a momentary suspension of the ego, the desires, the distractions, and the noise of the self. In those moments, the soul feels a clarity it rarely experiences in the hustle of daily life, and it is not just a clarity of thought, it is clarity of purpose. How often do we wake up in the morning with our minds crowded with tasks, worries, ambitions, and fears? How often do we find ourselves at the mercy of our desires, running endlessly after goals that seem urgent but are ultimately hollow? In those moments, sajda becomes a reminder, I am here for something greater than myself. I am here for a dialogue with my Creator. My significance is not measured by worldly success, by recognition, by applause. My significance is measured by my relationship with the one who made me, who sustains me, who knows my heart in ways I cannot comprehend. There is also an element of intimacy in sajda that we must never underestimate. When you prostrate, you are physically lower than everything around you. The earth is beneath you, the sky above you, and yet in that small, humble position, your heart opens directly to Allah. There are no intermediaries, no facades, no social masks. This is not about impressing anyone. This is not about performing a ritual for others to see. This is about the most private, most sincere form of connection you can experience. A dialogue in which your soul speaks, your heart listens, and the one who knows all things receives. Even beyond the psychological, the act of sajda teaches us a universal lesson. Greatness is not found in pride, in dominance, or in self-importance. True greatness is found in humility, in recognizing one's limitations, and in turning to the divine for guidance, support, and mercy. Every sajda is a lesson in this humility, a reminder that no matter how accomplished we are, no matter how knowledgeable, no matter how powerful, we are all servants. And that recognition, far from diminishing us, elevates us in ways that nothing else can. So when you next find yourself placing your forehead on the ground, I want you to pause for a moment. Feel the weight of your head on the earth. Recognize the symbolism of this act. Understand that this simple, repetitive gesture carries a universe of meaning. Surrender, intimacy, humility, clarity, and spiritual alignment. Every sajda is a step into that inner sanctum of your soul, where nothing matters except your connection to Allah. And here is the reflection I want to leave you with. If we could truly internalize the spiritual essence of every sajda, if we approached it with awareness rather than routine, the act would transform us. It would slowly but surely recalibrate our hearts, our minds, our priorities, and our very beings. Every sajda would not just be a step toward Allah. It would be a step away from the illusions that bind us and a step into the reality of our true purpose. In that realization lies both the beauty and the power of this sacred act. When we speak of closeness to Allah, many of us imagine lofty spiritual experiences, moments of inspiration or profound insight. But the reality is far simpler and far more profound. True closeness is built step by step, moment by moment, act by act. And one of the most tangible ways this closeness manifests is through sajda. Every time we place our forehead on the ground in complete submission, we are taking an actual physical step toward Allah. This is not metaphorical. The body reflects the soul, and the soul is shaped by intentional acts of devotion. Consider for a moment what it means to submit in this way. To bow, to lower yourself, to touch the earth with your head, is to acknowledge something far greater than yourself. It is an expression that transcends words. I am not in control, you are. My life, my heart, my destiny, they are in your hands. And when we internalize this acknowledgement, something remarkable happens. The distance we often feel between ourselves and the divine begins to shrink. Each sajda becomes a bridge across that distance. Each time we lower ourselves in humility, we invite Allah's mercy, His attention, and His presence into the innermost spaces of our hearts. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes the value of humility before Allah. In one verse, Allah reminds us that the believers are those who humble themselves in prayer. This is not just physical humility, but a humility of being. A recognition that despite all our knowledge, all our power, all our ambitions, we are ultimately servants. And there is a deep psychological truth here. Closeness to Allah is not achieved through grandiose gestures or intellectual feats alone. It is achieved through surrender, through recognition of dependence, and through acts that align our external behavior with our inner reality. Sajda does precisely that. There is also an incredible link between the consistency of sajda and the incremental deepening of our spiritual awareness. Spiritual growth is rarely sudden or dramatic. It is gradual, often imperceptible, but cumulative. Every prostration, when performed with presence of heart and sincerity of intention, is a step on that spiritual staircase. One sajda may feel ordinary, routine even, but 20 sajdas, 40, 100 over time. They accumulate into a profound sense of nearness to Allah. This is why the Prophet letter they described the servant as closest to his Lord when he is in sajda. It is not just a poetic expression. It is a statement about the spiritual mechanics of human psychology and divine proximity. The act conditions the heart, focusing attention, dissolving distraction, and cultivating reliance on Allah. Moreover, sajda is a practice of intentionality. In the midst of life's chaos, it is easy to drift, to act mechanically, or to forget the ultimate purpose of our existence. But when we deliberately and consciously engage in sajda, we pause, we recalibrate, and we realign ourselves with the reality of our servitude and our relationship with Allah. This pause is not a loss of time. It is the most productive use of our time because it shapes the inner landscape of our lives, which then flows into every decision, every interaction, and every choice we make. Each sajda becomes a spiritual heartbeat, a rhythm that draws us nearer to our Creator. There is also a profound philosophical lesson embedded in this simple act. The world teaches us to strive for autonomy, control, and self-sufficiency, But the spiritual reality is the opposite. True freedom, true strength, and true peace emerge from submission to the divine. Sajdah embodies this principle in a form that is immediate and experiential. When we submit, we are paradoxically empowered. We recognize our limits, we accept the reality of our dependence, and we place ourselves in the care of the one who never errs, never fails, and whose wisdom encompasses all things. Closeness to Allah, then, is not about distance covered in intellectual understanding alone. It is about proximity achieved through the acts that humble, focus, and open the heart. And here is what I want you to take away. Every time you go into sajda, imagine it as a deliberate step toward Allah. Imagine it as a journey, not a duty. Feel the humility in your body, but also the awakening in your heart. Each sajda is a conversation, a surrender, and a claim that your ultimate priority is not the fleeting pleasures or distractions of this world, but the eternal connection with your Creator. And when this consciousness becomes part of your routine, when each sajda is performed with awareness, the distance between you and Allah diminishes in ways that are subtle but transformative. So reflect on this. Closeness to Allah is not an abstract concept. It is lived through your actions. It is measured in the lowering of your forehead, in the sincerity of your heart, and in the recognition of your dependence. Every sajda, however small it may seem, is a step closer, not just physically, but spiritually, psychologically, and morally. And if we could truly internalize this, if we could transform our routine prostrations into intentional acts of drawing near, our lives would change profoundly. The path to Allah is right there, beneath your forehead, in each moment of submission, waiting for you to take that step. When we talk about sajda, it is easy to focus on its spiritual dimension and forget its profound psychological and emotional effects. Yet the two are deeply intertwined. The act of lowering oneself before Allah does more than draw us closer to Him. It reshapes the inner landscape of our minds and hearts. In a world that constantly demands our attention, where stress, anxiety, and distraction have become almost default states, sajda offers a unique sanctuary, a momentary escape from the tyranny of our own racing thoughts. Consider for a moment the physical posture of prostration. Your head is touching the ground, your hands and knees are supporting you, your body in complete submission. Psychologists have long studied how posture affects emotion. When we assume a posture of humility, our brain responds in ways that actually reduce stress, lower cortisol levels, and create a sense of grounding. Sajda is in essence a physiological act that signals to the mind and the heart. Release your burdens, your worries, your illusions of control. Let go, even if only for this moment. And in that letting go, a quietness begins to seep into the soul, a stillness that is hard to find elsewhere. But the benefits go deeper than mere stress relief. In sajda, we experience a paradox. By lowering ourselves, we elevate our consciousness. By submitting, we regain perspective. Life often feels overwhelming because we perceive ourselves as the center of the universe, constantly striving to control outcomes, to manage our emotions, to secure our position. Sajda interrupts this cycle. It reminds us in the most tangible way possible that we are not in control, that true stability comes not from manipulation or power, but from trust in Allah. This shift in perspective, though subtle, is transformative. It brings clarity in moments of confusion, calm in moments of anxiety, and a sense of balance when life feels unsteady. Emotionally, sajda is a release valve for the human heart. Every worry, every regret, every frustration that we carry into prayer can be placed, if only symbolically, onto the ground beneath our foreheads. In that position, our hearts learn a critical lesson, that vulnerability is not weakness, and that expressing our dependence on Allah is not a loss of dignity, but a reclamation of inner strength. There is a profound relief in knowing that we are not alone in our struggles, that there is a listening, compassionate presence, and that our burdens are acknowledged, even if silently. There is also an element of emotional recalibration in Sajdah. We often respond to life's pressures with reactive emotions: anger, impatience, envy, frustration. Sajdah interrupts these reactive cycles. When we submit physically, our minds begin to submit emotionally as well. The act creates a pause between stimulus and response, allowing the heart to reset, the ego to quiet, and the soul to realign with values rooted in faith, gratitude, and trust. Over time, this practice cultivates emotional resilience. The person who prostrates regularly learns almost imperceptibly to approach life with equanimity, to navigate challenges with patience, and to embrace uncertainty without despair. And the psychological impact extends to self-awareness. Sajdah is an intimate conversation with Allah, but it is also a mirror for the self. When you lower your head and reflect inwardly, you are forced to confront your limitations, your mistakes, and your vulnerabilities. This is not a self-criticism that leads to despair, but a reflective humility that encourages growth. The heart learns to accept its imperfections while maintaining hope in Allah's mercy. The mind learns that introspection is not punishment, but a pathway to self-improvement. In short, Sajdah nurtures both humility and confidence, humility before Allah and confidence in His guidance. Finally, Sajdah teaches emotional consistency. Life is unpredictable and emotions are often turbulent. Yet, when we build the habit of regular prostration, we create a steady rhythm in our lives, a ritual that brings the heart back to center. Just as physical exercise strengthens the body, spiritual practice strengthens the emotional and psychological core of the individual. Each sajdah becomes a small training ground for the soul, a place where the heart practices patience, the mind cultivates focus, and the spirit finds serenity. So when you next place your forehead to the ground, I want you to feel more than devotion. Feel the release of tension, the quieting of thoughts, the alignment of your heart with truth. Recognize that every sajdah is not just a step closer to Allah, but a step toward emotional freedom, psychological clarity, and inner resilience. The act that may seem routine is, in fact, a profound therapy for the heart, a sanctuary for the mind, and a grounding mechanism for the soul. Let this be your reflection. If we embrace the psychological and emotional gifts of Sajdah, we would carry tranquility into every aspect of our lives. Every moment of submission, every lowering of the head, would remind us that true strength lies not in domination or control, but in trust, humility, and surrender. And in that surrender, we find a depth of peace and a closeness to Allah that transforms not just our prayer, but our very existence. One of the most profound dimensions of Sajdah is its power to purify not just outwardly, but inwardly, spiritually, and morally. We often think of purification in terms of cleanliness, ablution, or ritual correctness, and of course these are important. But the deeper purification that Sajdah offers is one that transforms the very core of who we are. It cleanses the heart of arrogance, softens the ego, and aligns the soul with the reality of submission to Allah. Each sajdah, when performed with sincerity, is like a gentle, persistent stream washing away layers of spiritual dust that accumulate over time. Dust that clouds our judgment, hardens our hearts, and distances us from Allah. Think for a moment about the symbolism of the act itself. When we lower our heads to the ground, the most honored part of our body touches the earth. This physical lowering mirrors the inner act of humbling ourselves before Allah. Pride and arrogance are two of the heaviest burdens on the human soul, and they are the subtle thieves of our spiritual vitality. Every time we prostrate, we send a message to our own hearts. I am not the center of the universe, I am a servant. This repeated act of humility gradually chips away at the ego, which is often the root of resentment, envy, and selfishness. Through sajda, the heart learns to prioritize what truly matters: submission, integrity, and connection to the divine. There is also an emotional and moral cleansing that occurs in sajda. Life has a way of accumulating layers of resentment, frustration, and attachment to fleeting desire. When we enter into prostration, we symbolically lay all these burdens at the feet of Allah. It is as if the act itself says, "I am giving you my worries, my distractions, my impulses, and my regrets. I cannot carry them alone." This act of surrender is purifying because it releases the heart from clinging to what is temporary and often toxic, and reorients it toward the eternal, the meaningful, and the true. In that sense, sajda is not just a physical gesture. It is a moral and emotional detox, cleansing the heart of attachments that obscure our spiritual vision. From a philosophical perspective, purification through sajda is also about recognizing the transient nature of the self. We often define ourselves by accomplishments, social standing, or possessions. Yet these are ephemeral, fleeting markers. Sajda strips all of that away, leaving only the essence of the human being, a servant in need of mercy, guidance, and grace. This recognition purifies the soul by shifting its focus from the superficial to the essential, from the temporary to the eternal. It is a constant reminder that the true value of life is measured not in wealth or status, but in closeness to Allah, sincerity in worship, and the alignment of one's character with divine guidance. Sajda also cultivates moral clarity. When the heart is purified, the mind begins to see ethical boundaries more clearly. Acts of dishonesty, cruelty, and selfishness no longer resonate with a heart that has been softened by sincere prostration. Over time, the moral fabric of a person is strengthened. The repeated act of lowering oneself becomes a daily recalibration, aligning inner impulses with higher ethical standards and shaping the believer into someone whose actions reflect the principles they profess. Purification, then, is not only about removing what is bad. It is about nurturing what is good, cultivating virtues that endure because they are rooted in the soul rather than imposed externally. And there is a subtle psychological dimension as well. Each sajda allows the believer to confront their inner self, to acknowledge mistakes, weaknesses, and flaws, while simultaneously placing hope in Allah's mercy. This is a critical balance. Self-reflection without despair. By engaging in sajda, the heart learns to embrace accountability and responsibility while remaining humble and dependent on Allah's guidance. It teaches resilience, patience, and self-compassion, qualities that purify the soul and enable a person to navigate life's challenges with integrity and grace. So every sajda is not just a ritual, it is a step in a lifelong process of inner refinement. It teaches the believer to shed arrogance, release worldly attachments, strengthen moral insight, and cultivate emotional balance. Each lowering of the forehead is a symbolic and practical act of purification that touches every layer of our being: physical, emotional, psychological, moral, and spiritual. Reflect on this. If we approached every sajda with awareness of its purifying potential, if we internalize the reality that every prostration is an opportunity to cleanse our hearts and recalibrate our souls, we would not only draw nearer to Allah, but we would also become better, more conscious, more compassionate human beings. The path to inner purification is right beneath our foreheads, in every prostration we perform. And it is in this conscious act of surrender that the soul finds its truest, cleanest, and most elevated form. One of the most beautiful aspects of sajda is its rhythm, the regular, consistent act that becomes a thread running through our daily lives. It is easy to overlook this rhythm when we focus only on individual moments of prostration, but there is profound spiritual power in the continuity of our worship. Spiritual growth is rarely dramatic or sudden. It is gradual, cumulative, and persistent. Every sajda, though small on its own, contributes to a journey of closeness with Allah. This is a lesson not just in worship, but in life itself. The greatest transformations often come not from sudden leaps, but from steady, disciplined effort over time. Think about this in human terms. Just as physical exercise builds strength through repeated, deliberate action, so too does spiritual growth emerge through the repetition of acts that cultivate humility, surrender, and awareness. One sajda may feel insignificant, almost automatic, but a life filled with consistent prostration is a life being sculpted, moment by moment, into proximity with Allah. This is why the Prophet letter, FDF, emphasized regularity in worship, even if it is small. The small, consistent acts are far more spiritually powerful than occasional bursts of intensity. They create a rhythm in the heart, a discipline of the soul that aligns us with the divine in ways that intermittent devotion cannot. Consistency in sajda also teaches patience and resilience. Life is unpredictable, and our hearts are often distracted, restless, or burdened by worldly concerns. Yet, when we commit to regular prostration, we create a fixed point, a sanctuary in our lives. It is a reminder that no matter the chaos around us, there is a deliberate act we can return to, a place of humility and focus that anchors us. Over time, this consistency cultivates inner stability. The believer learns that spiritual proximity to Allah is not an occasional luxury, but a continuous journey that requires dedication, awareness, and the willingness to return to Him again and again. Regardless of circumstances, there is also a deeper psychological insight here. Human beings thrive on routine, but not all routines are equal. Some routines enslave us to distraction, to habit, to the endless pursuit of superficial goals. Other routines, like regular sajda, liberate us. They structure our lives around something that truly matters, something eternal. Each consistent prostration becomes a habit of the heart, teaching the mind to prioritize connection with Allah over fleeting desires. The rhythm of regular sajda cultivates mindfulness, focus, and presence qualities that extend far beyond the physical act itself and shape every aspect of the believer's life. Moreover, the journey of consistency transforms perception. When we engage in repeated acts of worship, we begin to notice subtleties in our own spiritual state. We learn to identify moments of distraction, recognize patterns in our thoughts, and refine the sincerity of our intention. Each sajda becomes an opportunity to self-correct, to evaluate our closeness to Allah, and to recommit ourselves. The journey of consistency is, therefore, not just about repetition, it is about refinement. It is a process of slow, deliberate alignment of the heart, mind, and soul with the reality of servitude and devotion. There is also a philosophical lesson embedded in this journey. Spiritual growth mirrors human life in its incremental nature. Rarely do we experience immediate mastery or perfection. Just as a tree grows slowly, extending its roots before its branches, so too must the soul grow steadily, with consistent effort. Each sajda is a step along this path, a building block that, over time, creates a strong foundation of faith, humility, and spiritual resilience. The believer who persists in consistent prostration is, in a very real sense, constructing a lifelong staircase toward Allah, one humble step at a time. And we must not forget the cumulative effect of these small acts. One sajda may seem like a drop in an ocean, but an ocean is made of drops. Years of consistent prostration day after day, month after month, transform the heart. What was once mechanical becomes intimate. What was once routine becomes a deep, ongoing dialogue with Allah. This is the power of the journey. It shapes the believer not through isolated acts, but through sustained devotion, that gradually reorients every part of life toward the divine. So, the reflection I want to leave you with is this. Do not underestimate the power of small, consistent acts of worship. Every sajda is more than a gesture. It is a step along a journey of spiritual proximity, humility, and refinement. Each prostration, repeated faithfully, compounds over time, shaping your heart, your mind, and your character. If we embrace consistency in our worship, we begin to live in a rhythm that aligns with the divine, a rhythm that cultivates presence, peace, and purpose. Remember this, the journey to Allah is not measured in sporadic moments of intensity, but in the steady, unwavering commitment to draw near, one sajda at a time. Each act of prostration is a step small, humble, and deliberate toward a heart that is cleansed, a soul that is grounded, and a life that reflects the eternal reality of servitude to Allah. And it is in this quiet, patient, consistent journey that true proximity to Allah is achieved. What makes sajda truly transformative is not just its effect on our spiritual state during prayer, but its ripple into every corner of our lives. When performed with mindfulness, it doesn't remain an isolated act confined to a few moments on the prayer mat. It reshapes the way we see ourselves, others, and the world. Every sajda carries the potential to influence our decisions, our interactions, and our priorities, guiding us to live a life that reflects the inner humility, awareness, and purpose cultivated through prostration. Consider how often we approach life mechanically, reacting to circumstances without reflection. Work pressures, family responsibilities, social expectations, and personal ambitions can cloud judgment and skew priorities. Yet the habit of regular, mindful sajda creates an internal anchor. In those moments of total submission, we practice humility and surrender, and these qualities gradually extend into our daily conduct. A heart that humbles itself before Allah is less likely to yield to arrogance in relationships, less prone to anger in conflict, and less driven by ego in decision-making. The act of lowering the forehead is mirrored in a lowering of pride, in a gentleness that permeates every interaction. Furthermore, sajda instills a sense of presence and focus that carries beyond prayer. In the modern world, distraction is constant and attention is fragmented. But in sajda, the mind learns to concentrate fully, to turn away from external noise and internal chatter, and to direct awareness to a single point, the connection with Allah. This ability to focus, nurtured through repeated prostration, becomes a skill in life, the capacity to listen carefully, to act intentionally, and to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Each sajda trains the heart and mind to prioritize what is meaningful over what is trivial, what is eternal over what is fleeting. There is also an ethical dimension to this transformation. When the heart internalizes the lessons of sajda, moral consciousness deepens. We become more aware of our responsibilities toward others, more attentive to justice, compassion, and integrity. The humility and surrender practiced in prostration cultivate empathy, patience, and moral courage. In essence, a life shaped by sajda is a life where ethical considerations are not theoretical ideals, but lived realities. Each act of prostration subtly reshapes behavior, encouraging the believer to act in ways that reflect the values cultivated in those intimate moments with Allah. Sajda also teaches resilience and perspective. Life inevitably presents challenges, setbacks, and moments of uncertainty. But the one who regularly turns to Allah in prostration has a profound advantage, a perspective rooted in awareness that control belongs ultimately to the divine. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice reliance on Allah, every difficulty a reminder of human limitation, and every success a gift to be approached with gratitude. This perspective, cultivated through repeated prostration, transforms the way we navigate daily life. We respond with composure rather than panic, with patience rather than frustration, and with hope rather than despair. Moreover, the practice of sajda fosters intentionality in all areas of life. It teaches that the small acts, when performed with consciousness and sincerity, have power far beyond their apparent simplicity. Just as each sajda is a step toward Allah, each ethical choice, each act of kindness, each disciplined decision becomes a step toward embodying the spiritual principles we cultivate in prayer. In this way, sajda is not a compartmentalized ritual, but a blueprint for living, a reminder that our inner spiritual state must inform and shape our outward behavior. The transformative effect of sajda is cumulative. One prostration shapes the moment, a lifetime of conscious prostrations shapes the character. The humility, presence, ethical sensitivity, patience, and reliance on Allah developed in sajda begin to define a person's identity. Over time, the believer moves through the world differently, with awareness, integrity, and intentionality. The lessons learned on the prayer mat become guiding principles in work, family, community, and personal growth. In essence, sajda is training for life, teaching us how to integrate our spiritual connection into every thought, word, and action. So, as we conclude this reflection on sajda, consider its holistic impact. Every time you lower your forehead to the ground, you are not just performing a ritual. You are taking a step that has the potential to reshape your heart, your mind, your character, and your life. Each sajda teaches humility in action, focus in thought, morality in behavior, resilience in challenge, and intentionality in living. Let this insight guide you. Do not see sajda as an isolated act of worship, but as a transformative practice with the power to influence every aspect of your existence. Every prostration is an opportunity to align your heart with Allah, to recalibrate your mind, and to integrate spiritual principles into daily life. The act of lowering your head is also an act of elevating your character. In this realization lies the true beauty of sajda. It is not only a step closer to Allah, but a step toward becoming the best version of yourself in this life and the next.